Am I still unsure how I feel about this Thundercats MOTU crossover? Yeah. Having that sort of cat head of the central tower be some sort of link to the Thundercats? Balder, 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 Balder Cats! Alright, enough of that. We gotta get these guys dressed again. This doesn't look like a 5.5 Masters of the Universe Lion-O, but we've got Lion-O in hand. Let's check him out. Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan. Thank you for joining me for another video here on the channel. Thundercats and Masters of the Universe. These are two franchises that have always felt like they go hand in hand. So many fans of one are oftentimes fans of the other, and because the two franchises have very similar looks and feels, a lot of people have always talked about crossovers between these two properties. And now that wish is coming true as Mattel is presenting us with a Thundercats Masters of the Universe toy line that is soon launching. And thanks to Mattel, we have the very first figure in hand today. It's the Lord of the Thundercats himself, Lion-O. So without further ado, let's jump on in and check out the first figure from Mattel's new Thundercats MOTU crossover. So here we go, Masters of the Universe and Thundercats. This is Lion-O, Lord of the Thundercats, and this will give us a good look at what the packaging is going to be like for this new lineup. It's continuing the bursting rocks motif that is typically seen on Masters of the Universe, but instead of red rocks, it is blue rocks that are exploding in the background, and then we have this very dark star field at the top of the card there, this very spacey theme. Blister bubble, of course, very similar to what we would typically see for Masters of the Universe, with our Lion-O housed inside. There's a mini comic behind that, and you can see that they have him packaged in his Eternia-style gear. Now, as we've seen from a lot of the early cross-sells for these figures, you can also see the accessories here in the packaging. They do have the ability to swap parts so that they look like they're more traditional Thundercats costumes. But they come in these blister cards in their new Eternia threads. So pretty interesting there. As we rotate around to the backside, you can see we've got a whole new style card back here. So we've got our cross-sell down at the bottom, which only shows illustrations of three figures being Lion-O, Cheetarah, and Battle Cat Man. That's the one I'm the most excited about. And then we have a little action feature call out, just letting us know that you can sheath the Sword of Omens onto his back. And above that, we actually have some beautiful artwork of Lion-O and Skeletor Mum-Ra right here. And then a little blurb that says, Lion-O, Lord of the Thundercats, battles back the ancient forces of evil from Third Earth to Third Eternia? Oh, very interesting stuff there. So why don't we go ahead and rip open this pretty new card back here, and we will get a closer look at Lion-O. And before we get to the figure, here's a quick look at the mini comic. If you don't want any spoilers on this, I would suggest skipping ahead, because I do want to flip through it just a little bit and talk about it. The comic is titled Third Eternia, and it's an interesting story. It kind of sets up what's going on here with Mum-Ra finding this book and essentially calling on the same spirits of evil that turn Mum-Ra into Mum-Ra the Ever-Living. And that signals Lion-O to show up. Now, this is what's very confusing about the story to me. Lion-O and Panthro and Cheetarah, they already all just look like these action figures, like wearing their Eternia-style new outfits. There's no explanation for it whatsoever. And even when they show up and meet He-Man on this planet, He-Man's wearing his outfit from this toy line, and Battle Cat is a anthropomorphic Battle Cat, he's like a Thundercat. Now, they say, welcome to Third Eternia. And I don't know, the whole thing is very confusing and it's weird. I guess maybe it's some sort of an Elseworlds story. I guess we'll just stick with it. I'm sure it'll explain itself. I just know that I read this and was very confused. I was like, what is even happening here? I don't get it. All right, so that brings us to Lion-O as he appears directly out of the packaging. So let me bring in the tape measure so you guys can see that the figure stands right at 6 inches tall. His big poofy hair might even push past that just a little bit there. And immediately, I noticed that the figure overall feels thinner than the other MOTU figures. I knew that they weren't going to be the same size as MOTU Origins, but I thought it was going to be a lot closer to Cartoon Collection, and it is close to Cartoon Collection, but it feels even different than that. So let's do a little comparison real quick between He-Man from the Cartoon Collection and this brand new Lion-O here, so that you can see that they are different. These are like new bodies. You can see the sculpts of the arms. Those do appear to be different, like the shoulders definitely. They're not as round as He-Man's, but the legs are where I really notice the difference. Like, look how much beefier He-Man's thighs are than Lion-O's. And that's one thing that I will say, Lion-O's legs look very skinny to me. Like, those look like skinny legs. Like, sure, he's got that sculpted in musculature there, but they seem so thin, especially in comparison to the torso and the arms. Like, the arms are bigger than his legs. This Lion-O skipped leg day, I think. So it's a little interesting, and I wasn't expecting them to go full on with new bodies. Let's go ahead and bring in the Origins one too. I just want to show, so we got standard Origins He-Man, which is more inspired by the vintage Masters of the Universe line with his proportions. And then there's that Cartoon Collection He-Man figure again. We'll bring that back in just so you can see them all standing side by side there. So you can see the difference between the three. So there's definitely a difference. It's going to be interesting to see what the He-Man figure really looks like when we get that, just so we can compare the three He-Man styles. All right, so as mentioned, Lion-O comes off the blister with his new Eternian-style duds. So he's got a He-Man-style harness that he's wearing over his standard blue bodysuit there that has the Thundercats insignia right on the front. It's sort of like a metallic-y blue. He's got this sort of crown-like piece over his head that his hair is coming out of the top of there. You can see there is a holster on the back, very similar to a lot of the He-Man armors, but the Sword of Omens fits in there perfectly. He's wearing a furry loincloth like He-Man. He's got fur-topped boots like other Eternians. And then he's got this new version of the claw shield, which is interesting. I don't think I like it very much. It doesn't really look like Lion-O's claw shield. And I get it, they just made something new, right? Something Eternian. But it's interesting how like the glove portion really only covers his hand, and then he's got like an actual shield part that comes out over the top. But I don't know, it's so different from the furry style claw shield that we typically see Lion-O have, whether it's brown or red like the vintage LJN toy. I don't know, those are both better than this in my opinion. That's just me. Maybe I'm just nitpicking, but I don't think I'm a huge fan of it. So articulation, if you are brand new to what Mattel's done with their Masters of the Universe line, this could be new to you. If you're just planning on picking these Thundercats figures up, you've never had any of the Origins figures, the articulation is the same, and it still has all of the pop-apart pieces here. Like, he actually comes with a little diagram that shows you which parts are removable on this figure. And I just realized that I had a piece that was off the figure here. So let me slide this back on real quick so you can see it. There we go. Technically, this completes his more Eternian look. So he's got this shoulder armor up here. And I do like the reference because you can see that the cat on the armor is the cat head from Eternia's Central Tower. So that's kind of cool, and that's why I'm waiting to see what the connection is. I'm hoping that the mini comics explain it, but you know, that's pretty cool. I guess if we're gonna connect the Thundercats to Eternia somehow, having that sort of cat head of the Central Tower be some sort of link to the Thundercats is kind of a fun idea. So it is kind of cool to see that on the armor here. So now let's get to the articulation. That head is on a ball joint, so it rolls all the way around, looks left and right. The shoulders can go up forwards, backwards, bend at the elbow, swivel at the elbow, swivel at the wrist, hinge on the wrist. You can see on the right hand too, he actually has the proper hinge that's on the top and bottom of his wrist. So he'll be able to really hold the sword up nice, which is very cool. You can see swivel at the waist there. Thighs have those hinge-like joints so they can go outwards, forwards, backwards, kind of rotate a little bit. You got bends at the knee, swivel at the boot cut, ankles, forwards, backwards, and rock side to side. So if you are already familiar with MOTU Origins or Cartoon Collection, you know what you're getting here. And all of the joints feel really good. The articulation feels nice and tight. He poses well. So that's all good there. Now, mix and matching of parts is the same as with MOTU Origins, and that is good for all of the interchangeable pieces here. So we got lots and lots of parts, and these are all meant so that we can swap on for the more basic Lion-O look. I just realized I forgot another piece here I should show you, because he also has this He-Man-style wrist bracer over here. Boy, I really goofed that up by playing around with this a little bit before I was filming. That is your complete look right there. That's your Eternian look for Lion-O right there, with the shoulder armor, with that wrist bracer. Let's go ahead and put the Sword of Omens in his hand here. There we go. So you can see the Sword of Omens. Let's see if we can get some proper Thundercats poses here. You need to be able to do sight beyond sight, which he can do pretty decently. You can see like you can't get the sword like all the way up to like his face, but you can get it in front of his face. He can't hold it with both hands with this claw shield on. In fact, he does have an interchangeable hand, but the other hand is open. You can only put the sword in the right hand there, but I showed you guys that wrist. Let's see. There you go. So you can also do this, which is nice, right? You can get him to hold the sword up. You've got that good wrist articulation there, so he can hold the sword kind of more upright, which is pretty cool. And then we can also do this. Straighten his arm out a little bit. There we go. Thundercats, ho! Holding the sword up. So that's pretty fun. All right, let's switch this guy to a more basic Lion-O, because I will say that that is one of the things that I feel like Mattel did right with these, is they included tons of interchangeable parts so that if you don't want to display him in his Eternian-style or his third Eternia-style, we can go with a more traditional look for a Lion-O that is in this style and scale. So I'm going to show you how to do that right now, because we've got swappable hair and boot tops and a hand and a belt. We got all these different things that we can swap. So yeah, first things first, the hair comes off of this figure. Look at that. We got full-on bald head Lion-O. There you go. Balder, 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 balder cats. You can see he's got like this little notch on the top of his head there. And the hair pieces have a little notch as well that'll kind of rest in that there to hold it into place. You got a little notch on the back of his head as well. He looks pretty funny there. And then, you know, with the swappable parts, that's actually going to help you with taking all the rest of these pieces off. So you can slide that shoulder armor off of the arm there. We actually can remove the figure at the torso, of course. We can take off the furry loincloth. We can remove the armor here, which is pretty cool. This actually brings up a pretty good point too. It looks like his blue bodysuit is also removable, which I wasn't expecting. Yeah, look at that. We can actually pop that off too. So if you want a full-on like shirtless Lion-O, I guess you've got that as an option too. Hey, hey, hey. Actually, while we're at it, this is a good time to like bring He-Man back in here. Here, He-Man, bro, I need you to strip out of your armor here. We gotta have a we gotta have a shirtless show off here, but this is specifically to show you the body of the new Thundercats figures, which are leaner. I mean, it is leaner. It's shaped a little different than the Cartoon Collection He-Man figures. It is smaller. Like all in all, even the shoulders sit lower than He-Man. Yeah, it's quite a bit smaller. All right, enough of that. We got to get these guys dressed again. Okay, so we removed that furry loincloth. So in its place, we can now put, look at this, the standard Lion-O Thundercats belt. We can just kind of put that around the waist. It's a bit tight. There we go. Perfect. And then we can reattach the torso there. Haha, looking more and more like Lion-O. But we also have the boots that can come off. So you've got these other boot tops here, which are his more traditional boots. And it is worth noting that they do have an L or an R on the inside here, so you know which leg they go on. So this has got the L, so we know that that's for his left leg. Let's pull off the other boot there. And then this is new. The feet actually come off of these boots. Look at that. That's not something that we usually see in MOTU Origins. So we can reattach the feet on the new boots. Same thing with the other side. You can see this is a lot of parts matching here to get your desired pose for Lion-O. There we go. More traditional Lion-O boots. We're gonna remove that wrist bracer that I put back on a little bit ago. The hand just pops out of socket. We can take that wrist bracer off, and then we can finish it up with the classic Lion-O hair. We're gonna put it over the head. Make sure we cover the bald spot all the way. Make sure we don't have that little notch showing there. And there we go. Now we have a much more standard looking Lion-O, which I have a feeling a lot of people are gonna display him this way. Now, we don't have a different claw shield. He only has that new claw shield, and I really don't like it with the classic Lion-O look, which is very, very unfortunate. Now you can take that off, because as I mentioned earlier, we've got like a regular Lion-O hand that we can put in its place, so there'd just be no claw shield. And you'll see he's got this big nub sticking off the side of his belt. There actually is a little peg on the inside of the claw shield, so you can plug that in on the side and hang it off the side of his belt like he typically does. That sits kind of weird if it's like over his leg, so I kind of tuck it back behind his leg a little bit there. And then, you know, we got the Sword of Omens, and now we've got Lion-O. So there he is. Like, it is pretty cool seeing Lion-O here in this style. I mean, it feels good. The figure feels good. I would just say that I still think he looks a little small. I think his legs especially look really skinny. I don't know why, if that's just me, but the legs feel very thin. I'm not a big fan of that claw shield. I don't know. But, you know, the figure itself, quality-wise, still feels really nice. It's a solid figure. I do think the mixing and matching of parts is so smart on this, and I feel like that's a lesson that they learned from Turtles of Grayskull, because the Turtles didn't have a way to just turn them into regular Ninja Turtles figures. They always had some elements of their new Eternia costumes always intact. So the fact that all the Thundercats in this line can just be turned into standard Thundercats figures, I think is really smart. And I think it's gonna get people to buy these more, because that way they can get just a straight up Lion-O figure. But it's interesting because this doesn't look like a 5.5 Masters of the Universe Lion-O. This just looks like a 6-inch Lion-O action figure, a bit on a smaller scale. In fact, this is a good idea. I should probably show some comparisons of this guy with some of these other releases. So it's comparison time. So we've got the Super 7 Ultimates Lion-O standing side by side with this figure. And I mean, honestly, you can see he's not that much bigger. So he's a 7-inch scale figure, where this new Mattel one is a 6-inch figure, so there's just a 1-inch difference in their heights, but very interesting looking at these side by side. Of course, Super 7's done multiple versions too of Lion-O. They've done some more animated looking, they've done some in the more toy style, so I just grabbed one just because I really wanted to see the height difference there. So let's also do this. Vintage LJN Lion-O standing alongside the new one. Now those LJN figures were also pretty tall. At least Lion-O was pretty tall. See, the vintage one is even 7 inches tall. So he towers over this new one here. Speaking of 5.5, this is the Funko Savage World Lion-O that came out a few years back, which is totally done in more of a vintage Masters of the Universe style with the squat legs and the bigger, bulkier body. So that's really interesting looking at these two side by side. He's definitely bulkier, but he's shorter. And unfortunately, I don't have the new Super 7 5.5 Lion-O to do a comparison, but what I do have is this custom that I made like way back in 2001. I just thought this would be fun to show you. This was my MOTU Lion-O crossover that I made way back when. That's a terrible paint deco, but kind of funny to see these come to fruition. Look, I predicted this. I predicted this a long time ago. So there you go, several different Lion-Os from several different toy companies, all slightly different in style and scale. Really interesting looking at these all standing side by side here. I don't know, I really expected these new Thundercats figures to be much more in a MOTU style, and they really aren't. Like, if you just saw this Lion-O figure just like this, without the Masters of the Universe packaging that he comes in, would you ever guess that this is a MOTU crossover? This just looks like a standard Lion-O figure like this. He comes with all these extra parts that have a much more MOTU feel, but yeah, the builds are so much more slender. You know, the proportions are much more, I guess, in line with what you would expect from Thundercats and not from He-Man, and that is really interesting to me. So there you go, my friends. That is a look at Lion-O from Mattel's brand new Thundercats and Masters of the Universe crossover. These figures are set to be arriving very soon. In fact, my pre-orders that I have on Big Bad Toy Store, I think they list July as the ship date, so that is very quickly approaching. I imagine these will start trickling into stores here pretty soon as well. If your store is actually carrying these, I don't see a lot of MOTU around these parts, which is why I basically pre-order everything through Big Bad Toy Store. But the Lion-O figure I got today was an early sample from Mattel, so once again, thank you to Mattel for sending this over so we can get a good look at the figure outside of the packaging and know what to expect going forward with this line. So, what do you guys think? Are you excited about the potential of this toy line? Does seeing this figure in hand change your mind about anything? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time.